ago, USA Today conducted a poll of a couple hundred Americans, and the question was, what do you believe about hell? 67% said they believed in hell. 25% of that 67 said that they were probably headed there. Another 25% of that 67 said their friends were headed there. Good friends. Now, another poll was conducted by a religious group that had 7,441 preachers. And it was, what do you believe about hell? This may surprise you. 58% of the Methodist preachers, 60% of the Episcopalian preachers, 54% Presbyterian, and 35% of all American Baptist preachers believe that hell is not a literal location. They believe that hell is the experience of separation, guilt, and meaninglessness in this lifetime. But frankly, if everyone's going to heaven, what are we doing here? I mean, come on. If everyone's going to heaven anyway, we might as well just go out there, lock up them doors, and go home. Because there ain't no use preaching and teaching if it ain't going to do nothing. Alright, there was this chaplain. Who knows what a chaplain is? Well, a chaplain is pretty much a preacher in the army. Pretty much. We'll just go with that. There was a young chaplain that was restationed to a different base. And when he reached that base, they said, no, they didn't say that. He was greeted by 3 soldiers. And he stepped out of the bus or whatever he stepped out of, and they said, do you believe in hell? A literal hell at least? And he thought about it, and he said, no, I don't. They just simply said, please resign. And started to walk off. You go, wait a second. Why do you want me to resign over a simple question like that? Well, they told him plain out. Well, if you're right and hell does exist, we don't need you. But if you're wrong, however, and hell does exist, we don't want you. Now, I assure you, 100% absolutely indeed, that Satan believes in a real hell. You may not believe in hell, but just because you don't believe in it doesn't lower the temperature there. Alright? Now, we don't really like to think about the reality of hell. And we often hear the statement, I don't believe that a good God would send anyone to hell. How two-faced? We don't ever hear, let's see, why would a good judge like that sentence a mass murderer to death for his actions? Now, why would he? We don't say that because it's not the judge's responsibility for what that guy did. It's his. Same thing with God. God is not at fault for what we do. And if you don't accept Him, you didn't accept Him and you're going to hell. Whether you like it or not. Now, the lesson that we're going to get to, actually we're getting to it right now, it's the parable in Luke chapter 16, verses 19 through 31. Okay? Now, this parable can be broken down into 3 different parts. The first part is the comparison before death. 19 through 31. Now, the second part is the comparison after death. And the last part is the corrections of the misconceptions about hell. Now, let's go to the first. In verses 19 through 21, let's read that. And I'm in the wrong part. There we are. 16. In 16, chapter 19, we're going to read through 21 right now. 16, chapter 19. Is that what it said? Okay. Luke 16, 19. All right. There was a certain rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen and fared sumptuously every day. But there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, full of sores, who was laid at his gates, desiring to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. Now, notice the contrast between these two men. There's a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen. Now, back in this day, the purple and fine linen is like we would wear Aeropostale and Abercrombie. It means you're something. Okay. Now, verse 20 introduces a new character by the name of Lazarus. He, however, was not dressed in fine clothes and purple and pink and all them other fancy colors. He was covered with sores and ulcers. And the dogs came and licked his sores. Now, these dogs that they're talking about is not your neighborhood poodle. Okay? These are wild dogs. Now, aside from the comfort and discomfort and possible infection that this could have really caused Lazarus, this rich man ignored it and went on enjoying his riches. Life was very comfortable for him, and he no doubt felt secure about it. But everything changed in verse 22. Verse 22 it reads, "So it was that the beggar died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried." Alright? Then the time came for the beggar to die. Alright? He was carried off to Abraham's side by angels. Alright? When these two men died, the roles swapped. This rich man that was here on earth is now in torments in hell, as it says in verse 23. Okay? And this beggar, Lazarus, is now by God in paradise. Well, this rich man, considering he was so rich, he probably had a very fancy, expensive, probably even had a gold casket for all we know, alright? But this beggar, he probably was thrown in the city dump. You never know. But then in verse 23 it says, "And in being in torments in Hades, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham afar off and Lazarus in his bosom." We find this rich man in hell where he's in torments. So hell is a real place. Now, this rich man could have easily helped out this beggar. Easily. I mean, he's got money. You could have given him a piece of bread and would have been happy. But no, he let the dogs lick his sores. And that's not nice. Now, a lot of people back in this time thought, if I've got some money, I'm in favor of God. Nope. This guy, he had money and he's in hell now. So just because you have money doesn't mean you are in God's favor. Alright. Now, let's go to the misconceptions about hell. A lot of people think some crazy stuff. Alright. Now, a lot of people think, well, why is this rich man in hell? A surface understanding of this parable might indicate that the rich man missed salvation because he wasn't generous enough with his money. That's not the case at all. The real reason for his being in hell was his disregard of the Word of God and his rejection of the Lord. Some people have the image of hell is not based on reality. Some people say that hell is nothing. We're just going to cease to exist. You're not going to hear nothing. You're not going to feel nothing. You're not going to thirst at all. Just not going to be here. Well, I heard about this gravestone once. I thought it was pretty funny, but it may not be. But it said, "Here lies an atheist, all dressed up and nowhere to go." Well, I bet he wishes that were true. Alright? Hell is a real place of conscious torment. The rich man was not dreaming. He was not in a state of mind. He was very well conscious and aware of his surroundings. He could feel, he could speak, he could thirst, he could do anything we can do here on earth. But he needed it a lot more.